Sama, should I go ahead? We've got around 12 people. Should I go ahead, Sama?
Yeah, we can start.
Okay, let's start, because people will, I think, join as we start. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to warmly welcome you back to episode 23 of the IIDS webinar series on politics, economy, and public policy. We took, as you've all probably noticed, we took 2 months break. The first was because of Dasai in October and then the elections in November, so we're back again. The speaker for this session today is Dr. Pankaj Koirala, Executive Director and Senior Research Fellow at Institute for Frontier Studies, IFS. And Dr. Koirala will be presenting his paper titled Deliberative Forms of Democracy and Intergenerational Sustainability Dilemma, or what is known as IS Dilemma. Dr. Koirala is the ED Research Fellow. He looks after the experiments and behavior section also at IFS. Previously, he had worked for various developments, research, and academic organizations, including IIDS, also Forward Nepal, Sahamati, Tribhuvan University, and High Caste in different capacities, and has accumulated more than 10 years of experience in disaster management, agriculture, livelihoods, and education. Dr. Koirala recently completed his PhD in economics from the Kochi University of Technology in Japan, with a major focus on human behavior for environmental problems, such as sustainability and climate change. His research interests lie in economic, environmental, and social issues, with the main focus on human thinking process, associated contexts, and institutions with respect to people's cognition and behavior. Dr. Koirala uses both qualitative and quantitative methods, including experiments, field experiments. Dr. Koirala is also looking for potential research and development collaborations for IFS. So if anyone is interested, please do reach out to him. Over to you, Dr. Koirala, and thank you very much for presenting today.
Hello.
Dr. Koirala, yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
Are you listening to me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Okay, so shall I start with the slides, Dr. Prabin?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead. And everyone, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Koirala is actually in Birganj currently, so his bandwidth may be a little low. So please forgive us for that, because he's doing some field work in Birganj. Despite his busy schedule, he's agreed to present. So thank you, Dr. Koirala, and go ahead, sir, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much for allowing me for the presentation. Actually, this is a good platform to present. Today, I'm going to present my paper. That is one of my PhD paper, Deliberative Forms of Democracy and Intergenerational Sustainability Dilemma. We are 3 authors. I'm the first author, and there is another 2, including my professor at the end. Let me start with the outline of my presentation. Today, I'm going to present basically in what is the motivation to do this research, and then followed by the experimental setup. Then I'll be presenting the results, followed by the discussion and the conclusion. And at the end, we'll discuss about the comments that I received from the participants. So let me start with the background and the motivation for these studies. As we know that we are, as a human being, always participated in the different development activities, because it is one of our goals as a human being. We have invented advanced technology and raised the standard of life. We developed the machineries, means of transportation. We also reached to the moon and gathered information about the galaxy, not only the moon, but also other galaxies and existing several light years away from the Earth. But at the same time, what we are facing is the environmental problem because of our activities. That is, we are facing numerous social and environmental problems. Basically, the climate change, accumulation of the government debt. So we have a kind of the government debt per individual is very high, even in case of Nepal. So we are overusing the resources. As a result, there is the extinctions of the various biodiversity, and the recently occurring COVID-19 also considered to be one of the environmental problem. So what we can see from there is some of our activities or our previous generations activities have already affected us, means that including us or the future generation is not going to see several biodiversity or several species that we have now seen. So this is the alarming situation that we are facing up. So altogether, there are several issues related to the environmental problems. They are mostly because of the human-made activity. So, and what I'm trying to establish, I'm trying to present here is the environmental problem is mostly the intergenerational issues that I already told you, that the climate change, which is because of the activities that our past generation done something, and they have actually modernized their activity, they overcome, etc., etc. Because of that, there is an externality, carbon dioxide emission, and because of this carbon dioxide emission, so we are facing global rise in temperature and the uneven precipitation, and so many other things like the solid waste management, solid waste issue, pollution issues. The river is being polluted. So there are several issues which can be linked with the or considered as an intergenerational issues. Means it is not not only placed or they situated in one point of time. It is in long time span. It is because of the consequences or the causes of the past generations. And what we do today is going to affect future generation as well. As I already stated, that whatever we do or whatever we consume today is going to affect the future generation. So many of the species that we see today is our future generation is not going to see. So climate change issue is also a kind of basically a intergenerational issue. And the climate change, sustainability, resources sustainability is also a kind of can be considered as an intergenerational issue. So I'm trying to link this issue with the existing set of decision-making models, including the democracy in my paper. And it is not a very big and very detailed paper. It is a very small intervention that is we try to reduce the entire phenomena into the laboratory setting. And within that laboratory setting, we try to change a little bit environment, and we try to see how this little bit changes can affect the people's decision making. So I try to explain in the following slides. So the issue, the intergenerational sustainability can be started with the situation for the human being when they make the decision making. That is specific IS problem, sustainable resource uses, waste management. All issues can be linked into the small dilemma that we call the intergenerational sustainability dilemma, which is a situation where the current generation means we, let's suppose, and the future generation means the generation yet to come. So the intergenerational sustainability dilemma is a situation where the current generation chooses to maximize. So whatever we do, the activities, we try to maximize our utility. So our benefits without considering future generations. And we ultimately compromise the intergenerational sustainability. So here the ideal condition is the intergenerational sustainability. But what we do in a modern time or existing time is we are consuming for our self-benefit, and we do not consider the future generation. Because of that, the problem occurs. Accumulated problem occurs, that is climate change and other kind of means the biodiversity loss. So another situation is a kind of there is in a dilemma always there is two possibilities. That is, one is means there is a conflicting choice. The first choice, as I said, there is a tendency of human being to maximize their utility. There is another choice, that is they sacrifice something from their benefit in today, means the current generation sacrifices, and because they consider the future generation and maintain the sustainability, means the resources usage is just, means they are not going to overconsume the resources, and as a result there will be no consequences for the externality. And what we do, what we achieve collectively is that we maintain the resources. That is the special situation we try to examine through the laboratory experiment in the laboratory, in the lab. So let me establish how the democracy is linked with the intergenerational sustainability. What is the reason behind I examine and try to establish the relationship between the democracy and the intergenerational sustainability dilemma. So as we know that the democracy is always considered as a better option than the authoritarian regime, and then it is believed that it represents the people, their interests and the concerns. As a result, the societies and the countries have been adopted several forms of democracy with this belief. Democratic process. There are several innovations, there are several systems within the democracy. That means, for example, we are using the parliamentary democracy. Other countries are using the representative, direct democracy, means the president directly. So there are several forms of democracy. So, and they all together, they have believed that this democracy represents the people, their interests, and the voices. So because of this, there is a success stories as we have been able to the healthcare facilities. At the same time, as I already mentioned, there is an environmental problem, sustainability and climate change. Because democracy has to deliver something, means that they have to deliver the progress as well. But there is a cost because of the progress, means we are creating some externality, that is the environmental problem, and we are compromising with the sustainability. As a result, in a global in a global process, we are also creating the climate change and other intergenerational debts. So, but when I do the literature review, I find that the literature means that the democracy with only the voting is not effective in resolving some voting best, or only voting is not effective for resolving the intergenerational sustainability. It is because there is a myopic tendency in the people, means the voters, who are living in the current time, and it is exacerbated. This kind of tendency is exacerbated in the modern autonomous or alienated society. When the technology has increased, means we are not connected with the society, we are not deliberating or discussing with the people, not understanding, we are looking around what is happening. So because we just go and vote for some party or select some kind of representative, because of this myopic, we always want to represent, we always want to vote those people. It means the elected persons are always a kind of function of our preference. So that is why our tendency, means the collective choice is going to happen or result in the myopic tendency, and that results in the kind of overconsumption of resources. So, and there are other kind of reasons as well. So our democratic process, especially the election cycles, and the dominance of the political interest are not exactly responsive towards the public. They are more responsive towards the elite people, with the businessmen, because their vested interests are really represent the public interest as well. So their interests are sometimes quite deviate from the public interest. So as a result, democratic process some of the time fails to deliver the results related to the sustainability. So overall, this process or this literature indicate that democracy only voting with the voting does not represent the voices of the future generations. So means it is not going to represent even the current generation, how it can going to represent the future generation. That is why it can be considered that the voting based democracy is not going to represent the future generation. So why this is, so children and women are not given permission to participation in the voting in some of the countries. It is the case. So women, children below the 16, but
Sama, I think we lost Dr. Koirala.
Yes, I think we've lost him.
Yeah, let's wait. You know, he's in Birgans doing his field work. Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for this brief interruption. Hopefully he'll be back. Let's just wait and thank you for your patience.
Prabin, so am I available?
Yeah, we lost you for a few seconds, Dr. Koirala. Please carry on. I'm sorry about this.
We've lost him. He'll probably be joining again.
Yeah, let's. You know, that's the challenge with Zoom. It's a brilliant platform, but you know, the connection is what determines whether you have a good experience or not. Hopefully he'll be back. If not, yeah, let's wait for a few solid minutes. Otherwise, I'll summarize his work because I'm discussing his paper. I'm very sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, Dr. Koirala, please go ahead.
Sorry. It's, that internet strength is
Yeah,
quite
of
bad.
course. Yeah, please go ahead,
Yeah.
sir.
Okay, let me. And there are some other challenges to represent the future generations' voices in the decision-making process, even in the democratic or the current democratic process. That is, as I already said, the children who are not fully given permission to participate in the voting. So even in our case, children cannot participate, even though they have several voices that maybe the democracy should be responsive in some sense, because the issue related to the climate change and other things means we can see there are several uprising voices regarding the future generation, how to include in the democratic decision making or the decision making process. For example, the Greta Thunberg raises the voices even in the UN to include or to think about or to consider the future generation or the children. So these are some issues that we can notice even in the newspaper. So underrepresentation is a problem in the democracy process, even in the IIDS problem, means intergenerational sustainability problem. The example means the future generation yet to born cannot participate. It is impossible for them to participate physically in a decision-making process under the democratic system. So means the future generation neither can represent or can nor can communicate with the current generation. So there is a kind of problem of underrepresentation, how to include them. So these are the problems that is compounded in resolving the intergenerational sustainability. So what are the possible solutions? So there are several solutions has been indicated in the literature. The deliberation is considered or has been discussed as alternatives to address the limitations of the body-based democracy. And there are several, including the Habermas, Bowman, and the Ray Chambers and the Manvries indicated that deliberation could be or can be a possible way to resolve this kind of problem in the democratic process or decision-making process. And why they consider that deliberation is important for the democracy. So deliberation among the people before voting may prevent the myopic behaviors and may enhance the intergenerational sustainability. This is one possible channels that how we can resolve intergenerational sustainability. And there may be other that the deliberation may further induce people to engage more on deliberation by bringing more reasons and the responsibility in their decisions. That means they can consider the future generation. They can, by considering the future generation, they make the choices. So it is a kind of situation where the deliberation may help. However, in the literature, there are very few literatures that has examined how deliberation can help support the intergenerational sustainability. For example, several researchers empirical and experimentally examine some mechanisms. For example, the intergenerational future generation, future ahead and back mechanism, intergenerational accountability with the deliberation. So there are several literatures that indicate maybe deliberation can help support. However, there is one particular research questions that how do deliberative forms, means several forms of democracy with the voting, along with the voting, means the previous literature only considered the deliberation. They do not include the voting mechanism because voting is one of the widely accepted aggregate model to one of the decision-making model to aggregate the collective choices and make the collective choice or make the decision. So we cannot overlook the voting system as well, because it is widely accepted and it is kind of synonymous for the democracy as well. So, but there is a literature, lack of literature that considered both the means deliberative forms and where that voting is at the end used for the final decision-making model. So I try to include or try to answer the research question, how do deliberative forms, several forms of democracy with voting resolve the IS problems and represent the future generations or their potential interest and the concern under the current democratic system, means the voting is included here. So based on that, I try to generate, I try to answer or test two hypotheses, means the first one, the intergenerational deliberation and the individual voting results in higher intergenerational sustainability than only with the individual voting. So IS means somehow it's quantified through the discrete choices. So another hypothesis is the intergenerational deliberation with the intergenerational accountability and the individual voting results in higher IS than only with the intergenerational and the deliberation and the individual voting. So we named as a baseline as a MB, majority voting. Another treatment is a DMB, and the final treatment is a MBTA treatment. So to test this hypothesis or to answer this open question, we conduct the laboratory experiment by following the intergenerational sustainability dilemma game, which is already established intergenerational sustainability game, the one game under the laboratory testing. And I recruited 312 subjects to participate in the sustainability game. At the same time, we also characterize the people's social value orientation, because whether the people are processual or the process, it also affects their choices for the future generations. So we try to control those kind of characteristics of the individual through the social value orientation game. And we also try to capture other kind of social demographic variables through the questionnaires. So subjects were recruited from the student subject pool of the Kyoto University of Technology, and to test the hypothesis, we empirically compare and characterize the probabilities for generation to choose a sustainable option across 3 models of decision making. As I already said, there are 3 treatments. One is the basic, another is a DMB, deliberation with majority voting, and another is a MBDA treatment, means the majority voting with intergenerational accountability. So I try to explain what are the difference between the 3 treatments and how we conduct the experiment. So let me first explain what is the intergenerational sustainability dilemma game. Intergenerational sustainability dilemma game is to choose between option A and option B for each of the generation, and they will make an individual and they will make a choice individually and collectively decide. So as I already said, the ISTG consists of a sequence of 6 generations, means here indicated, sharing the same resources X, means the initial amount of the resources initial value is 3,600 experimental points. So within that, a generation means, as indicated in a box, a generation is a group of 3 subjects sharing the same resources. X means it can be 3,600 at the beginning and 2,700 and so on. So it depends on how the previous generation make them. So let's suppose if the first generation collectively choose to option A and receive 3,600 experimental points, then the next generation can only receive 2,700 experimental points when they make a choice or they make a group decision of option A. If they make a group decision of option B, they will receive only 1,800 experimental points. On the other hand, if they try to sacrifice some experimental points for the future generation, they can only receive 2,700 experimental points. But what will be the next step? When they choose option B and sacrifice the points for the future generation, the second generation can enjoy, or they can have the same same environmental decision-making environment, means choosing option A, they will receive 3,600. And on the other hand, if they choose option B, they will receive only 2,700. So it is a kind of dilemma, choosing option A and option B. If they choose option A, means the choice can be considered as an unsustainable option. If they choose option B, then this choice can be considered as a sustainable option. So this is a basic situation of the experiment in which through this experiment or this game is tested across the different treatments. The first situation is a majority voting, and the second situation is a deliberative majority voting, and the third one is a majority voting with deliberative accountability. In the first generation, what people do is individually they make a choice between option A and option B, and collectively they vote, means individually they vote. And in the second one, they deliberate before voting, and later on they deliberate in a group and individually make the choices between option A, option B through the voting. So in case of the majority voting with the deliberative accountability, they first do the deliberation, then collectively they write something and send the message to this next generation. And after sending the message, how they make the decision and what is the reason behind making such decision, then they vote individually. So the generation choice here, the generation decision is made by the majority voting, means when there are more than 2 people, or that 2 people they make the same choice, then the group decision is considered as the majority voting here. So this is the situation. So this is the experimental procedure, means at the beginning how we conduct the experiment in the lab. So all the subjects gather in the instruction room, then we randomly assign to the treatment. Then the subjects pick up the load reach to determine their individual and generation IDs. So after that, they will, based on their assignment in the treatment or the generation or the group, they will be playing the game and make the choices. So at the end, after doing this kind of experiment, they will go to the another room and fill up the several other questions related to the socio-demographic information. At the same time, they will also play the social value orientation game. So, and after that conditions fulfill, they are paid for the experimental points. So what are the results? As I said already, this is a very simple experiment that we try to examine in the laboratory setting by reducing the external environment into the small area. After the experiment, we derive the data and analyze, and the summary statistics are as follows. And the table represents the frequencies and the percentage of the generation choices between option A and option B by treatment. As we can see here, there are two choices, option A and option B, across the three treatments. And what we can see here, the option B is our interest, because we want to see how the sustainability, the group's generations choices for sustainability are different. In the MB treatment, we can see only the 5.71% of the people choose option B, means almost 95% choose option A, means they are going to be sustainable, they want to be unsustainable. On the other hand, when we see and when we give them a pre-environment for discussion, means the deliberation, there is a slight increase in the percentage, means 12.12% people, 12.12% of the generation choose option B. On the other hand, when they are asked to write the reasons and advice after they deliberate and before they make the choices, their percentage of generations choices for sustainability or sustainable choice becomes 27.78%. So we try to characterize these summary statistics statistically by calculating the marginal effects of the independent variables on the probability of option B choices with the option A choice as a base group in the logic regression. Because as we can see there are three different models. In the first one, we try to include, in the first model, we try to include one of the treatments and try to compare with the baseline, where the base group is a majority voting. We can see there both treatments are significant. And in the second one, as I already said, there can be several other variables can be compounded with the people's choices. Then we try to include the prosociality. We try to characterize the prosociality of the individual and control them in the regression. And we can see here, even after controlling the prosociality characteristics of the individual in a group at the generational level, we find that both treatments are significant. In the model 3, we try to include other socioeconomic as well as the individual characteristics like the empathetic concerns, personal distress, or critical thinking disposition. And we even find that the MBTA treatment is robust consistently, and there is not much variation in the coefficient even. And we also find that there is a weak relationship between the DMB at the 10% confidence interval. So what we can see from these results is that the majority voting generally does not represent or address the IS problem. Means it basically represents what is going around the globe as well. So what we can see from the results is that the deliberation along with the majority voting may slightly induces generation members for the IS than the majority voting. That is the hypothesis one we tested. And another result is the majority voting with the deliberative accountability. Means when people are asked to deliberate and make are asked to be accountable to the future generations, their choices is going to be changed for the sustainability. That is what we found in the another finding. So after these findings, what we can see here or what we can. There might be several questions as well after these results. Why this happened? So this kind of questions I try to address through some major points. So how do the treatments affect the generations members' behavior for sustainability in the ISDG? So there are three possible ways that how the people's behavior might have changed for sustainability. One is a warm glow, that is a guilt aversion. Maybe the people in the generation or the member of the generations feel warm glow, or they try to avoid the guilt upon leaving nice reasons and advice for the future generation. There could be another legacy motive as well. So means as a one-way communication device induces the current generations to have a legacy. So motive as a cooperation initiator. So they may start the cooperation or cooperation in here. The meaning is the maintaining the sustainability. Another is a moral commitment. So there are several literatures which also support the moral commitment become very high once they become once they start considering the future generations. So IEA might have or the deliberation might have triggered the moral commitment of the people when they are asked to be accountable to the future generations. So after this discussion, I would like to say what is the message of this research, a very small research. Is a deliberation and the accountability may be necessary or shall be necessary for the democracy, or they can be considered as one of the democratic innovations with the voting in addressing the IS problems. Here, the IS problems represents the climate change and sustainability and so on. So many environmental and economic problem as well. So the implication is that the message is important for the democratic countries or the societies who believe in the democracy and where they seek to address the problems like the climate change and sustainability. Means as a democratic societies, we are also considering or thinking how to resolve this kind of sustainability issues or the outstanding environmental issues like climate change. So this can be helpful. It is a small kind of devices, but how it can be included in our social decision-making or individual decision-making. It is also important to include or see how it can have an implication to the society or the decision-making process. So overall, it will contribute or relevant in the viewpoint from the viewpoint of intergenerational fairness and the justice, because the climate change issue is not only a issue for us, issue of the current time. It is also an issue of the fairness and the justice to the future generations, because as a being the member of the planet or in the future member of the planet, they have equal right to experience the same environment that we are experiencing now, or they have a right to see the diversity of the planet as we are now seeing. That is how I see the things. Here, from this, I would like to conclude my presentation. If you have any questions and the comments, we can discuss further. Thank you so much.
A big round of applause, Dr. Koirala. Thank you so much for your great presentation. I'll briefly provide a few comments, and then after that, we'll open the floor for questions. Is that okay, Dr. Koirala? Okay, so is that okay? Sama, can you hear me?
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, just let me briefly comment on the paper. This paper has already been published, so my comments will probably mostly be centered around how we can improve this paper for future projects, right? So as Dr. Koirala mentioned, the setting here is development has brought us this far, right? But the paradox is this is having a massive negative impact on the environment, right? Environmental problems that Dr. Koirala identified, such as climate change, accumulation of government debts, overuse of resources, and extinction of various resources, etc. But then there is also a specific problem from all this, which is termed as intergenerational sustainability dilemma, or IS, right? And what IS stands for, I just want to summarize, is that it's a situation where the current generation chooses to maximize or sacrifice, right, its own benefits, without considering, something for the future generation. Okay, so that's the dilemma here. Do we, take it all, now, or do we save it also for future generations? Okay, that's the dilemma here. So that's why Dr. Koirala asks this research question. So he does this, research on if deliberative forms of democracy can actually solve this. But then he presents with these two different, channels. The first channel is the voting, I think, the first one is, let me just check my notes. Yeah. So he assigns two different types of treatments, right? The first one is only majority voting. The second one is deliberation, okay, and accountability treatments. Okay, so two treatments because this is a lab, okay. And what they found is the latter one actually influences, right? So the students or the sample or the treatment group that received, deliberation and accountability treatment, that these two induce more, these two induce the sample to choose a sustainable option than, the first treatment, which is the majority voting. Okay, so that's the paper. And I think the contribution is to the accountability literature, but not only that, the study also contributes to the literature by, demonstrating how societies seek to address this intergenerational fairness or justice question, right? So, this question of underrepresentation problem, for future generations. Okay, that's what the literature is, contributing to. So that's the summary, ladies and gentlemen, my comments, right? Let me begin with what this paper I think is also about, right? Because, I'm a political scientist. I study, social capital in post-conflict, societies, communities, right? So I think the background to this whole argument can also be traced back to, Kant, right? The famous, philosopher back in the 16th century. So Kant came up with these three definite, articles to create this sustainable peace, what he termed as the perpetual peace, right? So he identified these three different, elements, what we call as, the Kantian tripod of peace. So Republican, Federation, and world citizenship, right? So these three, different elements. Modern day scholars, what they've done, ladies and gentlemen, is they've tried to approximate these three ideas to, what in particular, what can we approximate these three different, criterias and, apply them to achieve peace. So what scholars have said is, I think what they've said is, well, democracy is the best alternative. So what Kant was saying is this, in a situation of this ideal world, but in reality, whatever he is preaching is actually represented by democracy. Okay, so I think that's how this article can also be tied to, Kant's philosophy, because only democracy is the most likely, not the only, but the most likely of all the choices we have, solution to all global problems. And I say this because, I study conflict and we have this, theory hypothesis of this democratic peace theory, that two democracies are unlikely to go to war, right? So that's the democratic peace, hypothesis. So likewise, Dr. Koirala has shown is, this form of democracy, this deliberative form of democracy, is probably a solution to this IS dilemma. Okay, this is a solution to IS dilemma because democratic deliberative practices allow us to cooperate with each other, right? If there's any misunderstandings or misgivings, then it's solved through this dialogue. Okay, this process of dialogue. So I think that's how the paper can also be, traced back to this, Kantian tripod of peace. Okay. So I just wanted to, give this view before I dive into the paper. Now, the paper's already been published, right? So my comments will probably help you, Dr. Koirala, to, further expand your project, okay? So the first is related to validity, okay, right? You do this with a lab, in a laboratory setting, but, you do this with, students, right? University students. But I think, especially in the context of Nepal, you could probably also employ real subjects, okay? And I say this for a reason, because last August, I had this, opportunity to visit, Dhankuta and visit a few of the LGUs, municipalities, both, Gaonpalika and Nagarpalikas. This was a project with the World Bank, and what we actually found was each municipality is actually required to conduct a sunwai, a nagarik sunwai, where the municipality officials, both elected and government officials, have to go and then carry this deliberative process. So they sit in a room. There's people from different communities, from different race, from different backgrounds of that particular LGU. And it's a 2-3 hours long process where there's a lot of questions and answers. A very excellent, deliberative process, related to democracy, right at the, at the heart of, how this should be carried out, in the sense it's, at the LGU level. So I was wondering if you could, of course, this is, something for you to think about. Probably you could reach out to different, agencies also, like, for example, like, how can you also incorporate what you're doing in the form of like, environmental problems and all that, like the IS dilemma, and see if, let's say, one treatment can be, just creating awareness about IS. How does that, impact, what they say about, IS? The other could be not only discussion, but actual involvement, right? A small, real treatment, in the sense people are actually these people go back to their respective communities.
Sorry.
Sorry, can you hear me? Samar, am I? Hello, Samar, was I?
Yeah, I'm hearing.
Yes, you're audible. You're audible.
Yeah, so thank you, Samar. So the second treatment could be, their
fine.
actual involvement. So not just a discussion, but they go to the tools, committees, and in fact, like, get people involved, and, not just this awareness, but do something related to IS, right? So I was thinking if these two or even more, further treatment arms could be applied in a real context, in a real world scenario. And I've given you just, out of my head, from my experience in Nepal, of what, you could do, right? That's my first, so for validity. The second, also, the comment is, does the type of resource matter, right? For example, like, let's say if natural forests, you can see that, forests, right? You can feel it. Whereas like use of fossil fuels, for example, Kathmandu, unfortunately, is really polluted, a lot of old vehicles, right? Due to, emissions and all that. But that's a different type of, this environmental problem. You get my point? So does different type of resources matter? Are people more open to, in the sense, like, willing to embrace this IS dilemma and work for it if they see it as opposed to like fuel emission? So I was wondering, do different types of resource really matter here? So another possibility for you, right? And finally, I also wanted to comment on the laboratory game, right? Here, you've used a standardized formula, right, to test these two competing hypotheses, right? But then, because I study, social capital, so I was wondering if there's a mediation effect, in the sense, your accountability and deliberation treatment is inducing this effect, you see this effect, because maybe something else is also happening, this channel, this bridge, right? And I was thinking deliberation requires a lot of like back and forth conversation, right? Involvement. So is there this social capital in the sense of bonding or bridging capital, right? You and I, who, really didn't interact, we're in a room together, different groups that really didn't interact, but now suddenly you have this continuous, process of this deliberation, which is building this bridging, this bonding capital between different groups. So is there a mediation, channel? So I strongly recommend maybe you could also do like, social games related to social capital based on what Putman argued, right? And see, in fact, if there is a channel. Yes, this accountability and deliberation, treatment matters, but what is the mechanism actually? Is that building this bond, this bridging bond, this, this bonding bond between two groups or between two individuals in a group setting, that is actually allowing this treatment to actually surface, right? So these are my comments, Dr. Koirala. Thank you once again for such a great paper. I enjoyed reading the paper. And we have a few questions, if you don't mind. So let's take the questions also, and then you can respond. Is that okay, Dr. Koirala?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the first question
I'll read the comments and
yes, I'll just quickly read the comment. The first one is from Dr. Ramacharya. So what is the difference between present form of democracy and countries that use the deliberation form of democracy, right? So that's his question. The second question is from Mr. Viva Pradhan. What are the socio-demographic variables that you listed in your study? How significant are the variations? So you could like respond to my comments and then respond to these two questions, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for the comments, Dr. Khadka. They are wonderful comments. I went through some of the comments when the paper was reviewed and we discussed before the publications as well. Regarding the validity of the research, because yes, you are very right. That is, this is just a laboratory setting and it doesn't fully represent the real scenarios. And because even the outcome variable is a kind of a proxy to the real phenomena. So there could be a very, very different choices and people's preferences for the different kind of sustainability indicator. That means they might differ in terms of the choices as well. For example, what you say, their choices for the fossil fuel, their choices for the forest conservation, and different kind of resource can matter as well. And there are several literatures which can which shows that different kind of resources matter and their choices can be different as well. But what we want to get them from what we want to do from this research is try to reduce the idea of the democracy into the laboratory setting. Because it is the very first or initial step to explore the wider area. So we start with this one, which can be achievable at the laboratory setting, and we try to bring and try to represent all kind of sustainability indicators into a single choices and bringing into the small dilemma that can help support or that can changes people's choices by creating a sustainability dilemma. So this is just a representative. It doesn't reflect the real phenomena, but somehow it indicates or give the direction somehow. So another reason we try to do from the student recruitment is the idea that students are generally considered one of the self-motivated people, or that they are the kind of let's say the pro-self people or the selfish people who try to maximize their utility always. So we try to see through that aspect. It means if we can change this kind of a subpopulation, means the effect can be different, can be higher in other kind of subpopulation as well. So I try to give more than the comments you have made, try to enrich the kind of a possible way that we can expand this research in the future. Means that there is another way. We try to start with the small games or the laboratory setting. It can be tested in the field, as you said. One is the real setting, or by assigning some kind of treatments, even in the field as a randomized treatment as well. So another possibility, as you said, there are several deliberations happening around us. For example, one example you bring in Nagarik Sunwai means that we use always. This is one of the deliberation processes that usually done by the political representatives. On the other hand, we are also doing at the public level. Means like at the TSOP, we are deliberating before the voting. That also affects how we make the choices. And because in the TSOP means there are the cheap talk. It means there are several research as well. The cheap talk, when they talk about the political agenda, means they talk about the several agendas from the different leaders, probably. And when they listen to the different agenda, they may prioritize. And after this prioritization, maybe this kind of priorities, or if they are interested in some kind of agenda, they see the certain agendas of the political leaders are promising, they might, that kind of thinking process might affect their. So means the deliberation is happening around TISA, Chautarama discussion, right? We are doing several deliberation. So how these deliberations process can help support our choices? This is also another area to do research in case of Nepal. What you say in the field experiment, or even exploring different type of deliberation and how this kind of phenomena is affecting our choices. even in case of the not only the political choices for the sustainability. I was trying to do in the political process as well, in the local process and the current parliament and the provincial level research, but little I need to do more homework. I didn't continue. I try to see how the patterns have been changed, whether peoples are following the agenda or they are, influenced by the public, the political leaders' agenda or not, and how they are making sustainable choices as well. Even how the manifesto of the political leaders, the political parties are representing the sustainable development goals, something like that. So I was trying to see those kind of things as well. So regarding the laboratory game, yeah, as you said, the mediation effect. If I rightly understand you are talking about the possibility about the interaction between the voting and the treatment. Deliberation. Are you asking this question? If
Yes, Dr. Pankaj. I was also thinking on the
Sorry.
lines of, that deliberation is having an effect, but what does deliberation lead to before, they show their support for IIDS, right? So because of, like you said, these talks, even in, tea shops, right? I don't know you, but then I constantly see you in the tea shop. We start talking, discussing for days, and then suddenly there's probably this gradually, not suddenly, this gradual build of this bond between you and me, right?
Yeah.
There's this trust between you and me. You get my point?
Yes.
So maybe the mediation effect is because of this social capital between us. That's what I meant.
Yeah, exactly. That is what the mechanism could try to could help support, or that might have developed over the generations. Means first it started within the group, and then between the group it is developed. Means across the generations. So that is how the cooperation happened. Because of this accountability, means passing the letter to the future generation, or the reasons and the justification, or let's say the reasons and the logic behind their choices, means that can develop a cooperation or the required trust between the generations that can help support the sustainability dilemma. So this is how we try to do it. Because of the accountability means, and the precondition required for the accountability is the deliberation. Because of the deliberation, accountability is happening. So deliberation is, of course, is a kind of foundation for the accountability, or the mediator. Without deliberation, we cannot create a situation that required for the accountability. And the accountability ultimately going to develop the intergenerational trust, means of the cooperation. So this is how we are explaining or try to see the things probably, but we need to test whether this mechanism is really working or not, either experimentally or other kind of exploratory research. So this is the future scope for collaboration, even with the Dr. Khadka. So yeah. Regarding yes. So if I correctly understand, okay, let me start with the Biba Pradhan first. So there are few socioeconomic variables, because it is a kind of a laboratory experiment with the kind of almost like a similar background, socioeconomic background with the Japanese student. They do not differ in terms of the economic variable, and their age is almost same, and other kind of socioeconomic background are almost same. So we do not include those kind of variables, although we include it, but later on they are not significant. We remove from the model or in the paper. The only the socioeconomic variable that we included probably is a gender of the person, whether they are male or female, because we consider probably there might be some kind of systematic difference between the male and female, but we do not find significant difference. In case of the individual, because the individual can be different in terms of their emotional characteristics and other kind of individual behavior. For example, let me, sorry. Yeah, so kind of prosociality of an individual. which is actually determined at the generational level. All the variables are actually calibrated for the generational level. An empathetic concern, personal distress, and the critical thinking dispositions. In the previous literatures has indicated that these literatures really affect the generation's choices. That is why we included this kind of individual characteristics into our model. So in case of the socioeconomic, we only included the gender because other variables are almost same. So these are the questions. This is my responses. So regarding the questions regarding what is the difference between the present form of democracy that countries use and the deliberation democracy. So yeah, actually there are several types of democracy around the world. So one of the that can be considered through the democracy point of view or the definition point of view. One is a direct democracy, another is a representative democracy. In case of Nepal, we are probably doing more towards the representative democracy. So there are other countries, maybe US, that can be considered as the direct democracy for some kind of process, but there is also representative democracy, I think, in case of US. So the deliberative democracy is more, I try to say, in the case of the democracy where people deliberate before making the collective choices. So the voting itself is considered the democracy. Deliberation is also considered a democracy. However, I try to bring both idea as a deliberative democracy, and literature also support those kind of idea that I have brought here. And in case of the decision-making model, for example, the democracy is a larger picture and it is a wider picture that cannot be confined in a single paper that I try to do here. However, to reduce the idea of overall democracy, we try to develop this research in a laboratory setting through the decision-making model into the group. So in case of the decision-making model, there are also several models. For example, one is a pure deliberation. They say the pure deliberation is also considered as a deliberation, as democracy, where they only decide through the deliberation and make the decision through the consensus. Means there will be no voting. So they say, okay, for example, in case of our parliament, when our in certain agenda, the head of the household, head of the parliament ask the participants or the parliamentary member to raise their hand for the agenda, for support, for the agenda or against the agenda. If they see, or if he or she see that the majority are for some agenda, then the agenda is passed. So it is can be considered as a deliberation only. So it's a kind of consensus. So there is no voting. On the other hand, there is a mixed model. Mixed model means people do, do voting after the deliberation. Means there is a kind of deliberation. After the deliberation, they individually vote. So I'm trying to bring the mixed idea where people collectively make the decision for the group, and before that they make a discussion across the group or within the group. That is how I see the differences between the democracy. Professor Acharya, I hope I satisfy your question.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Koirala. Professor Acharya, if you got any questions, please, follow-up questions. Anyone else, please feel free to raise your hand. Or I think Dr. Acharya would like to follow up. Go ahead, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. I think it's a very good paper, but I have some, I guess, conceptual issue when I try to relate with the real world problem. I will list, I think, a few of them. Number one, seems to me that, my comments come mostly from the economics point of view. I'm an economist. So the IS problem, the intergenerational problem, I think it's more kind of exaggerated than it is. You see, if I see the 30 years ago, the technology what we have and today is profoundly different. And the size of the pie, economic pie, has increased so much. We have attained so much technological progress. So maybe we are a bit late to address the climate change issue, but I think we should not be. We have not failed. I think the countries are moving towards that. So to me, the intergenerational dilemma issue that you have presented, I think something more than more than what I feel is the situation. And number two, my basic problem here is, I think when we try to imply that there's a different political system that will address issues better, I think we are in trouble, because to me, how to address the intergenerational issue is how do we reduce the discount rate of the future generation from our utility function. So within the given political system, I think this is more viable. Now, we already have this deliberative democratic system because generally people vote looking at what they did in the past. And if we think of completely changing the political system or something different, which I still not clear what is the difference between majority voting, deliberative voting, and MDTB or three scenario, I did not find that much conceptually different, and it's not possible. Even if they are different, to change the political system. The question is, given the present political system, what are the factors that will make our decision more rational to the future generation? I think that would be more accurate from the policy point of view. And the second thing I would say, I think when you have this kind of homogeneous student that you have about 33 students, to replicate to the world that is so heterogeneous by country, within a group, it's very difficult. So I know there is a limitation when you do laboratory testing, but I guess in some way it is very difficult to extrapolate this in a country level, which we are interested. So I per se, my comment are not I get a criticism of your paper. My comment is, can we make it? I mean, in your next paper, can we make it more viable so that we can address those issues, which I think is not do or die situation. I think countries are moving towards that. I'm very hopeful. The technology will address those issues. So I will leave it there.
Okay, thank you, Professor Acharya. You raised a good comment, actually. Yeah, I agree with you, because it is not going to represent, this laboratory setting is not going to represent the real situation, or maybe it can have some kind of exaggeration regarding the ISDG. But in case of the ISDG game, I have adopted this concept. I have not generated this concept. It is already established concept. I cannot address this issue. However, in case of exaggeration, probably, yeah, maybe it is try to bring the idea of ISDG concept, because we want to see some kind of harsh situation. We want to create some kind of harsh situation. Means there is a kind of raising voices regarding the tipping point reality, right? So it means there are several literature saying, even IPCC saying, we are very close towards the tipping point. Means the reverse, things are not going to be reversed after some years. So to reflect those kind of tipping point reality, means a harsh situation, ISDG is somehow designed. Yeah, of course, there should be some question, or there could be some questions regarding the extrapolation. Probably, yeah, I agree with you. We need to make more realistic, as well as how we can suggest the policies for at the country level, or the different socioeconomic backgrounds. Maybe several other research are necessary. This paper is not going to represent for those kind of things. We need several other research as well. So to really reflect or really suggest some kind of policy for the larger audience or the larger public. Yeah. So I'm happy to collaborate if in the future, if there is some opportunity arises.
Definitely, Dr. Koirala. Definitely. Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? Dr. Koirala, we're actually nearing the end of this presentation today because it's for an hour and 15 minutes and we're like an hour and 12 minutes. So let's just ask one more time. Ladies and gentlemen, just feel free to raise your hand, ask questions directly to Dr. Koirala, or you can type your questions here. Dr. Koirala, when are you heading back to Kathmandu?
So I'm thinking for tomorrow, but it depends on my work.
Got you, sir.
Yeah. So yeah.
I'll be back in
So
Nepal.
are you in Kathmandu?
No, I'm heading back on the 19th. I'll reach out to you and we should definitely meet up this time.
Okay, we should meet over a coffee.
Exactly, sir. So
Okay,
having
thank
said that, let me thank Dr. Koirala on behalf of IIDS for allowing us to be a part of your wonderful research project. We thoroughly enjoyed listening to you. And also to other listeners and participants, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us after 2 months. Next month, we're definitely, we already have a speaker. We'll be sending out invitations very soon. Have a wonderful, I guess, New Year's, and although we're all mostly Hindus and other religions, we also are deeply aware of the value of other religions. So, Happy New Year before we see you in January. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. And Dr. Koirala, thank you so much again. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I would like to thank all of the questions. I welcome them. And I'm happy to collaborate in the future if we get some opportunities as well. So thank you so much once again.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much, sir. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.